The glass shattered at her feet. "Serve us, you fool," the thug shouted, and the whole diner went silent. She knelt to clean it, trembling, when her daughter's crayon drawing slipped from her apron, landing at the polished shoes of the Mafia boss who'd just walked in. He picked it up, stared at it for a long moment, and something in his cold eyes changed forever. The coffee machine hissed like a dying animal. Nina wiped down the counter for the third time that hour, her reflection staring back at her from the chrome surface. Tired eyes, hair pulled into a messy bun, and a smile she'd practiced so many times it no longer reached her heart. Marlo's diner wasn't much. Cracked red vinyl booths, a jukebox that only played 3 songs, and fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry bees. But it was hers. Well, not legally. She just worked there. 6 nights a week, double shifts when Lily needed new shoes or when the electricity bill came with that angry red stamp. Tuesday nights were usually dead. A few truckers. Maybe old Mr. Peterson with his decaf and crossword puzzle. Tonight was no different, until the door slammed open hard enough to rattle the blinds. 4 men stumbled in, and Nina's stomach dropped. She knew trouble when she saw it. 28 years of life had taught her that much. These weren't regular customers. They wore expensive leather jackets that didn't match their crude laughs. Gold chains caught the light. One had a tattoo crawling up his neck like a snake trying to escape. "Well, well, well," the biggest one announced, his voice thick with alcohol and arrogance. "Look at the stump. This is where Tommy said we'd find real food." He grabbed a menu and tossed it over his shoulder without reading it. Nina approached with her notepad, her server's smile locked in place. "Good evening, gentlemen. What can I get you?" The snake tattoo guy leaned back, boots up on the table. "You hard of hearing, sweetheart? Tommy said this place had the best pie in the city. So bring us pie. And coffee. And make it quick." "Of course," Nina said softly. "We have apple, cherry, and... do we look like we care?" Another one interrupted, flicking ash from his cigarette directly onto the clean floor Nina had just mopped. "Just bring everything. We're celebrating." Nina nodded and turned toward the kitchen, but the biggest thug suddenly shot his arm out, knocking a glass of water clean off the counter. It exploded against the checkered floor, shards glittering like broken stars. The diner went completely silent. "Oops," he said, grinning. "Butterfingers." Nina's hands trembled as she grabbed the broom from behind the counter. Her throat felt tight. "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. Lily needs this job. You need this job." "Serve us, you fool," the man suddenly shouted, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to make the salt shaker jump. His friends erupted in laughter, a cruel chorus that echoed off the walls. Mr. Peterson looked down at his crossword, pretending not to see. The cook, Eddie, peered through the kitchen window, his face pale, then quickly ducked back. Nobody moved. Nobody ever did. Nina knelt down, picking up the larger pieces of glass with shaking fingers. A small shard cut her thumb, and she watched a drop of blood fall onto the white tile, mixing with the spilled water. That's when the door opened again. The change in atmosphere was immediate, like someone had sucked all the oxygen from the room. Nina looked up from the floor and saw polished black shoes first. Italian leather, perfectly shined, stepping carefully over the threshold. Then tailored gray pants with a razor-sharp crease. A charcoal suit jacket that probably cost more than her car. And finally, the face, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing, and salt and pepper hair slicked back with precision. Lorenzo Marino. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that name, even if they pretended not to. He owned the block. Not officially, there were no deeds with his name on them, but everyone paid rent to someone who paid someone who answered to him. He owned the pawn shop on 5th, the social club on 7th, and rumors said he owned half the police force too. 2 men flanked him, built like brick walls in dark suits, their eyes scanning the diner with professional detachment. Lorenzo moved with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. He walked past the thugs' table without even glancing at them, heading toward his usual booth in the back corner. but something made him pause. His gaze dropped to Nina, still kneeling on the floor surrounded by broken glass, blood on her thumb, tears threatening to spill from her eyes that she was desperately trying to hold back. Then his eyes shifted to the four men. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The biggest thug, the one who'd been so loud moments before, suddenly looked like a child caught stealing cookies. His swagger evaporated. "Mr. Marino," he stammered. We didn't know this is your place." Lorenzo still hadn't spoken. He just stood there, perfectly still, his dark eyes moving from the broken glass to Nina's trembling hands to the cigarette ash on her freshly mopped floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. "Apologize." "What?" The thug tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. "Mr. Marino, we were just having some fun." "Apologize," Lorenzo repeated, and though his volume hadn't changed, something in his tone made it clear this was not a negotiation. The four men practically fell over themselves standing up. "We're sorry," they mumbled in unison, dropping crumpled bills on the table, far more than their imaginary order would have cost. "We're really sorry, ma'am. We didn't mean." "Get out," Lorenzo said simply. They fled so fast one of them nearly tripped over the doorframe. The silence that followed was different from before. Not the awful, suffocating silence of fear, but something else. Something Nina couldn't quite name. She stood up slowly, still holding the broom, unsure what to do or say. Lorenzo finally looked directly at her, and she noticed something unexpected in his expression. Not pity, but something like recognition. As if he saw past the cheap uniform and tired smile to something deeper. But before either of them could speak, something slipped from Nina's apron pocket and fluttered to the ground, landing perfectly at Lorenzo's polished shoes. A crayon drawing. He bent down and picked it up with careful fingers, studying it in the fluorescent light. It showed a stick figure with a ponytail holding a tray, surrounded by other stick figures with angry faces and raised arms. At the top, in a child's careful handwriting, "Mommy at Work," by Lily. Age, 6-inch. Lorenzo stared at that drawing for what felt like an eternity. When he finally looked up at Nina again, something in his face had changed completely. Nina's heart hammered against her ribs as Lorenzo Marino held her daughter's drawing between his fingers, like it was something precious. Something fragile. She wanted to snatch it back, to apologize for the childish scribbles somehow ending up at the feet of the most dangerous man in the neighborhood. But her voice had abandoned her completely. "Your daughter drew this?" Lorenzo asked, his tone stripped of the cold authority he'd used moments before. Nina managed a nod. "This morning. Before school. She likes to draw me at work." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to fall." "Don't apologize," he studied the drawing again, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "She sees you serving angry people. She drew you surrounded by anger." His eyes met Nina's. "How often does that happen?" The question caught her off guard. Nobody had ever asked her that. Not her manager, not the other waitresses, not even Eddie who worked the kitchen and saw everything. "It's fine," Nina said automatically, reaching for the drawing. "Really? It's just part of the job. People get frustrated, and—" "It's not fine." Lorenzo's voice was quiet, but absolute. He looked at the stick figure version of Nina, small, surrounded, but still standing, still holding that tray. She's 6 years old, and she already knows her mother faces cruelty just to feed her. Something in Nina's chest cracked. She'd spent years building walls around that exact truth, and this stranger had demolished them with a single sentence. One of Lorenzo's bodyguards shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, we should." Lorenzo held up a hand, silencing him. He carefully folded the drawing and extended it back to Nina. When she took it, their fingers brushed for just a second, and she noticed his hands weren't what she expected. They were scarred across the knuckles, marked by a life she could only imagine. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nina. Nina Castellano." Something flickered across his face at the Italian surname, but he didn't comment on it. "And Lily?" She stays with someone while you work nights. Nina hesitated. This felt like dangerous territory, revealing too much to a man like him. But something about the way he looked at that drawing, the way his whole demeanor had shifted, it didn't feel like an interrogation. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She's 82 and can't afford her medications, so I help with the cost, and she watches Lily. It's not ideal, but Nina stopped herself. Why was she telling him this? I should clean up this glass. She knelt again, but Lorenzo's voice stopped her. Leave it. It wasn't a command. It was something else. He turned to one of his men. Marco, clean this up. The bodyguard looked momentarily confused. This clearly wasn't in his job description, but he moved immediately, taking the broom from Nina's hands with surprising gentleness. Lorenzo gestured to a booth.
Seat.
Please. Nina glanced at the kitchen where Eddie was definitely watching through the window, probably having a heart attack. The few remaining customers were pretending very hard to mind their own business, while obviously listening to every word. She sat. Lorenzo slid into the opposite side, and his second bodyguard positioned himself at a respectful distance, watching the door. How long have you worked here? Lorenzo asked. 3 years. Since my husband. Nina stopped. She never talked about Daniel. Not with strangers. Not with anyone if she could help it. But Lorenzo's expression was patient. Not pushy.
Just
listening. Since my husband left. She finished quietly. Lily was 3. He said being a father wasn't what he'd signed up for. So, it's been just us. Lorenzo nodded slowly, and something passed behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or old pain resurfacing. My wife died 4 years ago, he said, and Nina's breath caught. This wasn't the kind of information men like Lorenzo Marino shared with waitresses and diners.
Cancer.
She fought for 2 years. My daughter Sophia was 12 when we lost her. I'm sorry, Nina whispered and meant it. Sophia is 16 now, Lorenzo continued, his voice softer than Nina thought possible.
Smart. Stubborn.
She looks like her mother, but has my temper, which terrifies me. The ghost of a smile touched his lips.
She used to draw pictures like this.
Of her mother. Of our family. I have boxes of them in my office that I can't bring myself to look at. Nina understood then why the crayon drawing had affected him so deeply. Your daughter, Lorenzo said. She drew you standing. Not running. Not hiding. Fighting to serve people who don't deserve your service. He leaned forward slightly. That takes courage. Real courage. The kind most of my men don't have. Nina didn't know what to say to that. Marco finished sweeping up the glass and stood awkwardly, waiting for instructions. Lorenzo dismissed him with a subtle gesture. I own a restaurant, Lorenzo said suddenly. Marino's on Oak Street. Have you heard of it? Nina had. Everyone had. It was the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance, where city officials and businessmen met for deals that never made it into official minutes. I need someone like you there, Lorenzo continued. Someone who understands respect. Grace under pressure. Someone who doesn't break when the world pushes. Nina's mind reeled. I don't understand. You just met me. Your daughter's drawing told me everything I needed to know. Lorenzo stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Think about it. Triple your current salary. Better hours. And nobody, his voice hardened just slightly, will ever shout at you again. He placed a business card on the table, then paused. Keep that drawing safe, Nina Castellano. It's proof that, even in darkness, our children still see us as heroes. Then he was gone, his bodyguards flanking him, the door closing softly behind them. Nina sat alone in the booth, holding her daughter's crayon drawing and a business card that might change everything, wondering if she'd just been offered salvation or made a deal with the devil himself. Nina didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small bedroom, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a horse if you tilted your head just right. Lily's soft breathing drifted through the thin wall between them, peaceful, innocent, unaware that her crayon drawing had somehow caught the attention of a man who could change their lives with a phone call. Or end them just as easily. Nina turned Lorenzo's business card over in her fingers for the 100th time. Heavy cardstock. Embossed lettering. Simple and elegant. Lorenzo Marino. Marino's Fine Dining. A phone number. Nothing else. Triple her salary. Better hours. Respect. It sounded like a fairy tale, and Nina had stopped believing in those the day Daniel packed his bags and told her that fatherhood wasn't his journey. But she couldn't stop thinking about Lorenzo's face when he looked at Lily's drawing. That wasn't the expression of a man offering charity. It was something deeper. Something that looked almost like grief. When dawn finally crept through her threadbare curtains, Nina gave up on sleep. She made coffee in the pot that only worked if you jiggled the handle, then sat at their tiny kitchen table watching Lily's empty cereal bowl, wondering what kind of mother even considered working for a man like Lorenzo Marino. The kind who's 3 months behind on rent, she thought bitterly. The kind whose daughter needs new winter boots and dental work. Mommy? Lily shuffled out in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Why are you up? It's still dark. Just thinking, baby. Nina pulled Lily into her lap, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. Do you remember that drawing you made yesterday? The one of Mommy at work? Lily nodded, suddenly more awake. Did you like it? I made the angry people really angry, because that's what they look like when they yell at you. Nina's heart clenched. You notice when people yell at Mommy? All the time, Lily said matter-of-factly, playing with the frayed edge of Nina's robe. But you never yell back. You just smile. Mrs. Chun says that's because you're strong like a superhero, but superheroes are supposed to fight the bad guys, not bring them pie. Out of the mouths of babes, Nina thought, tears pricking her eyes. What if Mommy got a new job? She asked carefully. At a fancier restaurant. We'd have more money for things you need. But Mommy would be working for someone. Complicated. Lily tilted her head, considering this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could manage. Would the people there yell at you? No, Nina said, remembering Lorenzo's promise. I don't think they would. Then you should do it, Lily declared, as if it were the simplest decision in the world. Can I have Fruit Loops? By the time Nina opened Marlo's diner at 10 o'clock, she'd almost convinced herself that last night had been some kind of exhaustion-induced hallucination. But then the black car pulled up. It was the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in this neighborhood, a town car with tinted windows, so clean it reflected the morning sun like a mirror. Nina's hands froze on the door she'd just unlocked. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Not Lorenzo. Someone younger, maybe 40, with steel-gray hair and a neat beard. He wore a charcoal suit that was expensive but not showy, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who'd been trained to be aware of everything around him. He approached Nina with a polite smile. Mrs. Castellano?
I'm Salvatore Di Natale.
Mr. Marino's assistant. Nina's mouth went dry. I haven't decided yet.
About the job.
I need more time to. Mr. Marino anticipated that, Salvatore said smoothly, reaching into his jacket. For one terrifying moment, Nina's mind went to places shaped by too many crime movies, but he simply pulled out a cream-colored envelope. He asked me to deliver this. The envelope was heavy, sealed with actual wax, a detail so old-fashioned it seemed almost romantic. The seal showed an ornate M. Nina took it with trembling fingers. What is this? An invitation, Salvatore said. Not a demand. Mr. Marino wants you to understand exactly what you'd be accepting before you make any decisions. He believes in informed choices. Nina broke the seal and pulled out a card written in elegant, masculine handwriting. Nina, I apologize for the abruptness of my offer last night. You deserve more than a business card and a stranger's promises. Join me for lunch tomorrow. Bring Lily. Let her see where you might work. Let yourself see what kind of man is making this offer.
No obligations.
No pressure. Just clarity. If you accept, Salvatore will bring you at noon. If you decline, you'll never hear from me again. Either choice is honorable.
Respectfully, L.M.
P.S. I spoke with Mrs. Chen this morning. Her medications will be covered for the next year, regardless of your decision. She's been caring for your daughter with arthritic hands because you couldn't afford to pay her more. That ends now. Nina read the last part 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. He what? She whispered. Mr. Marino made some calls, Salvatore said quietly. Mrs. Chen's prescriptions will be filled at Romano's pharmacy, starting today. All costs handled. But why? I might say no. Mr. Marino doesn't help people because he expects something in return, Salvatore said, and there was something in his voice. Loyalty, maybe, or genuine respect. He helps them because his wife taught him that power without compassion is just cruelty in an expensive suit. Those were her exact words, apparently. He still lives by them. Nina looked down at the invitation, at the careful handwriting that had taken time and thought. Tomorrow at noon, Salvatore said. The address is on the back. There's no wrong answer, Mrs. Castellano. Just your answer. He returned to the car and drove away, leaving Nina standing in the doorway of a diner that suddenly felt smaller than ever, holding an invitation that felt impossibly heavy. When Eddie arrived 20 minutes later, he found her sitting in a booth, crying quietly, with an envelope clutched to her chest and something that might have been hope blooming painfully in her heart for the first time in years. The iron gates opened slowly, like the entrance to another world. Nina gripped the steering wheel of her 15-year-old Honda, following Salvatore's car up a winding driveway lined with manicured hedges and flowering trees she couldn't name. Lily pressed her face against the back window, eyes wide with wonder. Mommy, is this a castle? She whispered. Something like that, baby. The villa emerged from behind a curtain of willows, 3 stories of cream-colored stone with terracotta roof tiles and ivy climbing the walls like nature's decoration. Fountains.
Actual marble fountains.
Nina had seen places like this in magazines that Mrs. Chen left in the laundromat, but never imagined she'd actually visit one. Her car looked ridiculous parked next to Salvatore's town car, like a beggar at a king's feast. Nina almost turned around right then. But the front door opened, and Lorenzo stepped out. He wasn't wearing a suit this time. Just dark slacks and a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing those scarred forearms. Somehow, this made him seem more dangerous, not less. More human. Nina, he said warmly as she helped Lily out of the car. Thank you for coming. And this must be Lily. He crouched down to Lily's level, which surprised Nina. Most adults towered over children, spoke down to them. Lorenzo made himself small. Hello, Lily.
I'm Lorenzo.
I have a daughter who's been very excited to meet you. Lily, normally shy around strangers, studied him with a 6-year-old's brutal honesty. You're the man for Mommy's work. She said you're complicated. Lorenzo's eyebrows rose, and he glanced at Nina with barely concealed amusement. Did she now? Well, your mother is very wise. I am complicated, but I try to be kind when it matters. Is that acceptable? Lily considered this seriously, then nodded. Okay. Do you really have fountains? 3 of them. Would you like to see? Yes, please. Lorenzo stood and gestured toward the side of the villa. The main fountain is through the garden. My daughter Sophia is there right now. She's been waiting. As they walked along a stone path bordered by roses, Nina couldn't shake the surreal quality of it all. Yesterday, she'd been cleaning up broken glass. Today, she was strolling through an Italian villa with a crime lord who spoke to her daughter like she mattered. They rounded a corner, and Lily gasped. The fountain was magnificent, 3 tiers of carved marble with water cascading down like liquid crystal. But that's not what captured Lily's attention. A teenage girl sat on the fountain's edge, dark hair in a braid, wearing paint-splattered jeans and a tank top. She had a sketchbook balanced on her knees, completely absorbed in her drawing. Sophia, Lorenzo called softly. The girl looked up and Nina saw Lorenzo's eyes staring back from a younger, feminine face. Beautiful and sharp, with that same intensity her father carried.
Papa.
Sophia set down her sketchbook and stood. Then she saw Lily and smiled, a genuine, delighted smile that transformed her serious expression. You must be Lily. Your mom is the one Papa won't stop talking about. Sophia, Lorenzo said, a warning in his voice.
What?
It's true. She's raising a daughter alone, Sophia. She works with grace under pressure, Sophia. She reminds me of your mother, Sophia. The impression of her father was spot on, and despite everything, Nina felt herself smile. Lily tugged on Nina's hand. Can I go see? Of course, baby. Stay where I can see you. Lily ran to Sophia, who immediately showed her the sketchbook. Within seconds, they were sitting together on the fountain's edge, Sophia pointing out different drawing techniques, while Lily watched with rapt attention. She's wonderful with children, Nina said quietly. She's lonely, Lorenzo replied, and there was pain in those two words. After her mother died, Sophia closed herself off. No friends. Just books and art and her angry father. He watched his daughter laugh at something Lily said. I haven't heard her laugh like that in months. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their daughters bond over crayon techniques and fountain spray. Come, Lorenzo said eventually. Let them play. You and I should talk. He led her to a patio overlooking the gardens, where a table had been set with simple elegance, fresh bread, olive oil, grilled vegetables, and pasta that smelled like heaven. I didn't know what you liked, Lorenzo said, pulling out Nina's chair before sitting across from her. So, I made what my wife used to make when she wanted comfort food. You cooked this. Surprised? He poured her wine, then water, when she hesitated. My mother owned a restaurant in Sicily. She taught all her children to cook before she taught us anything else. A person who can't feed themselves is helpless, she'd say. A person who can't feed others is selfish. Nina took a bite of the pasta and nearly moaned. It was perfect, simple, but perfect. The job, Lorenzo said, setting down his fork. Let me be clear about what I'm offering. Marino's is a legitimate restaurant. Fully licensed, regularly inspected, completely legal. But I won't lie to you, powerful people eat there. Judges, politicians, businessmen who operate in gray areas. You'll serve people who make deals that never see daylight. And you? Nina asked, surprising herself with her boldness. What deals do you make? Lorenzo met her eyes steadily. I protect this neighborhood. I make sure certain businesses pay their debts. I ensure that people who can't go to the police have somewhere to turn. Is it legal? Sometimes. Is it necessary? Always. Do I hurt people? He paused. Only people who hurt others first. It should have frightened her. Maybe it did. But there was something almost refreshing about his honesty. I won't ask you to do anything except serve food and be treated with respect, Lorenzo continued. You'll work dinner service 4 nights a week. Salary is $3,000 a month plus tips, which at Marino's are substantial. You'll be home before Lily's bedtime. $3,000. Nina made barely $1,000 at Marlo's, working twice as many hours. Why me? She whispered. Really? Lorenzo looked toward the fountain, where Sophia was now letting Lily try her sketching pencils. Because my daughter needs to remember that strong women exist. Because your daughter drew you standing in the face of cruelty. And because my wife made me promise, right before she died, that I'd never forget what it meant to be human. His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. You reminded me of that promise. Nina felt tears threatening again. I'm scared. Good, Lorenzo said. Fear means you're smart, but don't let it make you small. Lily's laughter rang out across the garden like a bell. Okay, Nina whispered. I'll do it. Lorenzo smiled, really smiled for the first time since she'd met him. Welcome to Marino's, Nina Castellano. 4 days later, Nina stood in front of Marino's fine dining, smoothing down her new uniform, a crisp white blouse and elegant black slacks that actually fit, unlike the cheap polyester she'd worn at Marlo's. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door. "You've got this, Mommy," Lily had said that morning, hugging her tight. "Remember, you're a superhero." Nina wished she felt like one. Inside, Marino's was everything the diner wasn't. Warm amber lighting instead of fluorescent glare. Real linen tablecloths. Fresh flowers on every table. The scent of garlic and wine, and something expensive she couldn't identify. "You must be Nina," a woman in her 50s approached, elegant in a black dress, her silver hair styled perfectly.
I'm Gabriela.
"I manage the front of house. Lorenzo told me to expect you." The way she said Lorenzo's name, familiar, almost maternal, told Nina this woman had known him for years. "I'm ready to learn," Nina said, trying to sound confident. Gabriela's expression softened. "I know you're nervous. But Lorenzo doesn't make mistakes about people. If he hired you, you belong here." She glanced toward the kitchen. Though not everyone sees it that way yet. Nina followed her gaze and caught two servers watching her from near the bar, a tall man with slicked-back hair and a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Their expressions weren't welcoming. "That's Dante and Alessandra," Gabriela said quietly. "They've worked here for 3 years. They're protective of this place. Don't take it personally." But over the next several hours, it became very personal. "Wrong fork," Alessandra hissed when Nina was setting a table. "This is fine dining, not a truck stop. The burgundy goes on the right," Dante corrected with barely concealed contempt. "Did you even study the wine list?" Nina had studied. She'd spent 2 nights memorizing wines she'd never tasted, cuts of meat she'd never eaten, French terms she couldn't pronounce. But under their scrutiny, everything she'd learned seemed to evaporate. By the time dinner service started, Nina's confidence had crumbled. She moved through the dining room like a ghost, second-guessing every step. And then she noticed the other servers watching her differently. Not with contempt, but with calculation. Like they were trying to figure out what made her special. What gave a diner waitress access to Lorenzo Marino's world. "I heard he personally hired her," someone whispered near the kitchen. "After knowing her for what, 5 minutes? There's got to be more to it. Maybe she's, with him." Nina's face burned. She ducked into the small office where Gabriela was reviewing reservations. "They think I'm sleeping with him," Nina said, her voice shaking. "They think that's why I'm here." Gabriela sighed, setting down her reading glasses. "People in this world always assume the worst. It's safer than believing in kindness," she stood, placing a hand on Nina's shoulder. "But here's what I know. Lorenzo hasn't looked at a woman with anything but polite distance since Maria died. Until you." Nina's head snapped up. "There's nothing. I'm not." "I know," Gabriela said gently. "That's not what I meant. He looks at you with recognition. Like you remind him of something he'd forgotten. That's more dangerous than attraction, Nina. It means you matter." Across town, in a dimly lit social club that smelled of cigars and old money, Lorenzo sat across from Vincent Ricci. Ricci was everything Lorenzo had decided not to become: flashy gold rings, a suit that screamed for attention, and a cruelty in his eyes that served no purpose except his own entertainment. "I heard an interesting rumor, Lorenzo," Ricci said, swirling his whiskey. "You hired a waitress. Some single mother from a dump on 5th Street. That true?" Lorenzo's expression remained neutral. "I hired someone qualified. My staffing decisions aren't your concern. But they are, cousin." The word cousin dripped with false familiarity. They were connected through marriage 3 generations back, barely family, but enough that Ricci felt entitled to opinions. "See, the families are watching you. Always have been. You've held this territory through fear and respect. But now..." He leaned forward. "Now they're saying Lorenzo Marino's going soft. Hiring charity cases. Playing benefactor. And who exactly is saying this?" "Everyone," Ricci smiled. "The Castellis think you're distracted. The Moretti crew thinks you're weak. They're circling Lorenzo, waiting to see if the great Marino has finally lost his edge." "Let them circle," Lorenzo said coldly. "I've buried better men than them." "I don't doubt it. But you used to bury them before they became problems." Now you're taking in strays. Ricci shook his head. Compassion in our world is blood in the water. Sharks can smell it a mile away. Lorenzo stood, buttoning his jacket. This conversation is over. Just friendly advice, cousin. That waitress? She's a liability. Everyone you care about becomes one. Ask yourself if she's worth what's coming. Nina learned this truth faster than she expected. On her third night, a distinguished man in his 60s sat at one of her tables. Silver hair, kind eyes, expensive suit. He ordered the braised lamb without looking at the menu. "You're new," he said pleasantly. "Yes, sir. Started this week." Lorenzo's choice, I assume? When Nina hesitated, he smiled.
Don't worry.
"I'm an old friend. Judge Richard Castellano." "Any relation?" Nina's maiden name. Her father's name. A man she hadn't seen in 15 years. "No, sir," she lied. But his eyes said he knew differently. When she brought his lamb, he spoke quietly. In this restaurant, every conversation is a negotiation. Every plate of food carries messages. Every smile can mean life or death. He cut into his meat with surgical precision. "You seem like a nice girl, Nina. A good mother. Ask yourself if you really understand where you're standing." That night, as Nina served senators and developers, lawyers and men whose faces she recognized from news reports about alleged organized crime, she realized what she'd walked into. Every smile she'd given had been photographed by someone. Every table she'd served had been a test. And somewhere in the shadows, people were keeping score. 2 nights later, Nina was starting to understand the rhythm of Marino's, the unspoken codes, the careful choreography of serving people who wielded power like weapons. She'd just delivered risotto to a table of city councilmen when Gabriella touched her elbow. "Lorenzo wants you on the private dining room tonight. Table of 8. Very important." Nina's stomach tightened. The private dining room was reserved for Lorenzo's most significant guests, meetings that required discretion, conversations that couldn't happen in public view. "Is Sophia coming?" Nina asked. She'd learned that Lorenzo sometimes brought his daughter to these dinners, teaching her the family business through observation. "She's already here," Gabriella said. "Lorenzo likes her to see how negotiations work, how respect is earned." The private room was all dark wood and candlelight, intimate and elegant. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table, Sophia beside him, looking uncomfortable in a black dress. Around them sat men Nina recognized from previous nights, Lorenzo's inner circle, she'd learned. His captains. And at the other end of the table, a man she didn't recognize. Younger than Lorenzo, maybe 40, with cold eyes and a predatory smile. Vincent Ricci. Nina felt the tension the moment she entered with the wine.
It was thick enough to choke on.
The famous waitress, Ricci said, his voice dripping with false charm. "Lorenzo's latest project." "Nina is my employee," Lorenzo said coldly. "Show respect." Of course, Ricci's smile widened. "I meant no offense. It's just fascinating, Lorenzo. You, who once burned down a restaurant for serving you cold pasta, now hiring women out of pity." Sophia's hand tightened around her water glass. Nina saw the girl's jaw clench, her father's anger reflected in a younger face. Nina poured wine with steady hands, pretending not to hear. This was part of the job, Gabriella had warned her. Invisible until needed. Silent unless spoken to. Pity had nothing to do with it, Lorenzo said. Nina earned her position. By doing what exactly? Ricci pressed.
I am genuinely curious.
What makes a diner waitress worth Lorenzo Marino's personal attention? The other men at the table shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't negotiation anymore. This was provocation. Nina set down the wine bottle and met Ricci's eyes. By showing up. By doing my job with dignity. By not needing to tear others down to feel important. The room went completely silent. Ricci's smile vanished. Careful, sweetheart. You don't know who you're talking to. And you don't know who you're disrespecting, Nina replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Mr. Marino gave me a chance when I needed one. That's not pity. That's recognizing worth that men like you can't see. Sophia's eyes went wide. Lorenzo's expression was unreadable. Ricci stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Lorenzo, are you going to let your help speak to me like? The explosion cut him off. The restaurant's front windows shattered inward, glass and smoke and screaming filling the air. Then gunfire, sharp cracks that Nina's mind couldn't process at first because they seemed impossible, unreal. Lorenzo's men moved instantly, weapons appearing from nowhere, forming a barrier around the table. Lorenzo grabbed Sophia, pulling her down. "Get down," someone shouted. Nina dropped to the floor just as a second explosion rocked the kitchen. Fire bloomed orange and hungry through the doorway. More gunfire. Shouting in Italian. The acrid smell of smoke and cordite. Through the chaos, Nina saw Ricci pull a gun, saw Lorenzo's bodyguards tackle him, saw the dining room descending into a war zone she couldn't comprehend. Then she heard it, Sophia screaming. Nina's head snapped up. The massive chandelier above the table was swaying, its chain damaged by the blast. Sophia was directly underneath it, frozen in terror while Lorenzo fought with one of Ricci's men who'd burst through the door. Nobody else saw. Everyone was focused on the firefight erupting in the main dining room. The chandelier's chain snapped. Nina didn't think. She launched herself across the floor, grabbed Sophia around the waist, and threw them both sideways. The chandelier crashed down exactly where Sophia had been standing, hundreds of pounds of crystal and metal that would have killed her instantly. But the edge caught Nina's arm, crushing it against the floor. She felt something break, felt fire race up her shoulder, felt her own scream tear from her throat. "Nina!" Sophia was crying, trying to pull her away from the wreckage.
Papa.
"Papa, help." Lorenzo appeared, his suit torn, blood on his face, someone else's blood. His eyes went wide when he saw Nina pinned under the chandelier's edge, her arm bent at an unnatural angle. "Don't move her," he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos.
Marco.
"Get this off her. Now." His men lifted the chandelier carefully. The pain when they moved it made Nina's vision go white. She heard Sophia sobbing, felt Lorenzo's hands gentle on her face. "Stay with me, Nina. Stay with me." "Sophia," Nina gasped. "Is she?" "Because of you, she's fine. Because of you, my daughter is alive." More gunfire. Sirens in the distance. Someone shouting that Ricci's men were retreating. Nina's vision was fading, but she saw Lorenzo's face above her. Not the crime boss, not the powerful man feared throughout the city. Just a father who'd almost lost his daughter, looking at the woman who'd saved her. "I've got you," he whispered, lifting her as carefully as if she were made of glass. "I've got you, Nina. You're going to be fine." Sophia ran alongside them, holding Nina's uninjured hand, her face streaked with tears and soot. As Lorenzo carried her toward the door, past overturned tables and shattered glass and the wreckage of the restaurant he'd built, Nina thought about Lily's drawing, the stick figure standing strong against angry people. Maybe she'd been a superhero after all. Then the darkness took her, and she knew nothing more. Nina woke to the sound of beeping and the smell of antiseptic. Her arm felt like it was filled with broken glass. When she tried to move, pain shot through her shoulder, forcing a gasp from her lips. "Don't move," the voice was soft but commanding. "You'll tear the stitches." Nina's eyes focused slowly. Hospital room, white walls, morning light filtering through pale curtains. And beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days, sat Lorenzo Marino. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a rumpled dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. A cut above his eyebrow had been butterfly bandaged. He looked exhausted and human, and nothing like the composed crime boss she'd served dinner to. "How long?" Nina's voice came out hoarse. 18 hours. They had to set 3 fractures in your arm and repair damage to your shoulder. The doctor said. He paused, something flickering across his face. He said another inch, and the chandelier would have crushed your spine. You'd have been paralyzed. Or dead. The memory came flooding back. Sophia's scream, the chandelier falling, her body moving before her mind could catch up. Sophia, Nina whispered urgently. Is she completely unharmed? Because of you, Lorenzo leaned forward, his hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles were white. You saved my daughter's life, Nina. You barely knew her, and you threw yourself in front of a falling chandelier to save her. I didn't think. She's a child. Anyone would have. No, Lorenzo interrupted, his voice rough. Not anyone. Most people would have saved themselves. My own men didn't see it in time. But you did. You saw my daughter in danger, and you didn't hesitate. Nina noticed then that his eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. Lorenzo Marino.
Crying.
Where's Sophia now? Nina asked. Outside. With Salvatore. She hasn't left the hospital. She won't eat, won't go home. She keeps asking for you, the lady who saved me. She calls you. She drew you this. Lorenzo pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket and carefully opened it with hands that trembled slightly. It was a pencil sketch, remarkably skilled for a 16-year-old. It showed Nina mid-leap, arms outstretched towards Sophia, the chandelier falling above them like a crystal nightmare. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, my guardian angel. Thank you for my life, Sophia. Nina's eyes filled with tears. She shouldn't thank me. I was just doing what my men are paid to do and failed at. Lorenzo's voice cracked. What I failed to do, because I was too busy fighting Ricci. He stood abruptly, turning toward the window, his shoulders rigid. I brought you into that world, Nina. I promised you'd be safe, that you'd be respected, and instead you nearly died protecting my child from my mistakes. It wasn't your fault. Ricci is dead. Lorenzo's voice was flat, emotionless. I made sure of it. Him and every man who walked into my restaurant with guns. But that doesn't change what happened to you. Nina struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain. Lorenzo, look at me. He turned slowly, and she saw something in his expression she'd never expected to see: guilt. Raw, consuming guilt. I chose to work for you, Nina said firmly. Nobody forced me. And when Sophia was in danger, I chose to help her. That wasn't your fault. That was me being a mother, any mother, who couldn't watch a child die. Sophia won't stop talking about you, Lorenzo said quietly, returning to his chair. Last night, while you were in surgery, she told me that you reminded her of her mother. That Maria would have done the same thing. That she finally understood why I hired you. He reached out and gently touched the edge of Nina's hospital bed, not quite touching her, but close enough that she could feel the intention. My men don't understand courage like yours, he continued. They know violence. They know loyalty bought with money or fear. But what you did,
Pure selfless courage.
That's rare in my world. That's what Maria had. That's what Sophia needed to see, that women can be warriors without ever holding a weapon. Where's Lily? Nina asked suddenly, her heart clenching. Does she know? Is she scared? Mrs. Chun has her. I called her myself, told her you were in an accident but you're fine. Lily made you a drawing too. Salvatore has it. She drew you as a superhero with a cape. Lorenzo almost smiled. She's not wrong. There was a soft knock at the door, and Salvatore entered, followed by Sophia. The teenage girl looked small and young, her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw Nina awake, she burst into tears and rushed to the bedside.
I'm sorry, Sofa sobbed.
I'm so sorry. You're hurt because of me. Come here, Nina said, opening her good arm. Sophia collapsed into the embrace, crying like the scared child she still was beneath her tough exterior. Lorenzo watched them, his jaw working with emotion he was clearly fighting to contain. My mother used to say that family isn't just blood, he said quietly. It's choosing to stand beside someone when the world falls apart. Nina, you stood beside my daughter when death was falling. That makes you family. And I protect family. What does that mean? Nina asked, still holding Sophia. Lorenzo met her eyes with an intensity that was almost frightening. It means your medical bills are paid. All of them. It means you'll never work another day in your life unless you want to. It means Lily will go to any school she chooses, and I'll make sure she has every opportunity my daughter has. And it means, his voice dropped, that anyone who ever threatens you or your daughter will answer to me.
Personally.
Lorenzo, I can't accept. It's not negotiable, he said firmly. Then, softer. Please. Let me do this. You gave me back my daughter. Let me give you back your life. Sophia pulled away, wiping her eyes. Please say yes, she whispered. You saved me. Let Papa save you back. Nina looked at them. This broken family that had somehow adopted her into their complicated, dangerous, loving world. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Lorenzo's shoulders sagged with relief. Then, he did something that shocked her. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently.
Thank you, he said.
For everything. 6 weeks later, the autumn sun painted Oak Street in shades of amber and gold as Nina stood across from what used to be Marlo's diner. Except it wasn't Marlo's anymore. The weathered sign was gone, replaced by elegant letters in cream and forest green, Lily and Sophia's Corner Cafe. Through the sparkling, clean windows, Nina could see the transformation. The cracked vinyl booths had been reupholstered in soft leather, the flickering fluorescent lights replaced with warm Edison bulbs, and fresh flowers sat on every table. But it wasn't fancy. It was welcoming. It was home. Mommy, look. Lily tugged on her hand, pointing at the window where a large frame hung behind the counter. It's my drawing. There it was, the crayon picture that had started everything. Mommy at Work. By Lily. Age 6 inch, except now it had been professionally framed and matted, and beside it was Sophia's pencil sketch of Nina saving her from the chandelier. 2 perspectives of the same woman. 2 daughters seeing their hero. Do you like it? Sophia appeared beside them, her dark hair pulled back, wearing a cafe apron with paint stains already on it. At 16, she was discovering that running a cafe was harder than it looked, but she'd insisted on being part of it. It's perfect, Nina whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Her arm was still in a sling, healing slowly but surely. The doctor said she'd regain full mobility with physical therapy. Lorenzo had hired the best specialists money could buy, despite Nina's protests. Come on, Sophia said, linking her arm through Nina's good one. Papa's inside. He's been here since 6 this morning making sure everything's perfect. They walked through the door, a small bell chiming cheerfully, and Nina stopped, overwhelmed. Eddie was in the kitchen, visible through a new window, already prepping for the lunch rush. Gabriella stood by the register, elegant as ever, supervising the final arrangements. Mrs. Chen sat in a corner booth with several other elderly neighbors, tissues in hand, crying happy tears. And in the back booth, the same booth where Lorenzo had first spoken to Nina after the thugs fled, sat Lorenzo Marino himself, looking oddly out of place in his expensive suit among the comfortable simplicity of the cafe. He stood when he saw her, something soft in his usually guarded expression. Well, he asked, what do you think? Nina couldn't speak. She walked slowly through the cafe, touching the tables, seeing the menu boards with simple, honest food. Nothing pretentious, nothing designed to intimidate. Just good meals at fair prices for real people. The neighborhood needs this, Lorenzo said, coming to stand beside her. A place where families can eat without fear. Where single mothers can work without harassment. Where children are always welcome, he paused. Where my daughter can learn that power should protect, not exploit. You did this for Sophia? Nina asked. I did this for all of us. Lorenzo gestured around the cafe. After Maria died, I forgot what we were building everything for. The businesses, the territory, the respect. I thought that was the point. But it wasn't. The point was always to make our corner of the world safer. Better. Maria understood that. You reminded me. Lily ran up to Sophia, pulling her toward the kitchen. Can you teach me to make the cookies? You promised. Only if your mom says it's okay, Sophia called back, already being dragged away. Nina laughed. Go ahead, baby. But listen to Sophia. Lorenzo watched them disappear into the kitchen. Two girls who shouldn't have belonged in each other's worlds, but had found sisterhood anyway. There are rules for this cafe, he said quietly. I had them printed and framed. Want to see? He led her to a tasteful sign by the entrance. Welcome to Lily and Sophia's Corner. Our rules. 1. All people are treated with respect. No exceptions. 2. Children eat free on Tuesdays. 3. If you can't afford a meal, we'll never turn you away. 4. Kindness is our currency. 5. Anyone who breaks these rules answers to management. Nina smiled through her tears. Management being you? The girls insisted I be listed as co-manager, Lorenzo said with mock seriousness. Apparently, I need supervision. Nina laughed, really laughed, for the first time since the attack. It felt like releasing something she'd been holding too tightly for too long. I heard Ricci's territory was absorbed by the Castellis, she said carefully. She'd been reading newspapers, learning the language of Lorenzo's world. It was, Lorenzo confirmed, peacefully. Turns out when you save a judge's niece, he glanced at Nina meaningfully, certain families remember debts owed. Judge Richard Castellano sends his regards, by the way, and his apologies for not claiming you as family sooner.
So he had known.
Her estranged father had known who she was all along. The neighborhood is quiet now, Lorenzo continued. The families have agreed. This cafe is neutral ground. Sacred ground. No business conducted here. No violence. No threats. His voice hardened slightly. I made sure everyone understood the consequences of breaking that agreement. Nina could imagine exactly how he'd made them understand. So what happens now? She asked. Lorenzo looked at her for a long moment. Now you decide. You can run this cafe, take a salary, raise Lily in peace. Or you can walk away entirely. I'll find someone else to manage it. Either way, you're set for life. The cafe's profits go into a trust for both girls' educations. And you? I visit sometimes.
Sit in that booth.
Drink coffee that's too hot and eat cookies that Sophia burns. A genuine smile crossed his face. I try to remember that power without purpose is just cruelty in an expensive suit. His wife's words, still guiding him. Laughter erupted from the kitchen. Two girls covered in flour, holding up a tray of slightly lopsided cookies like a trophy. Nina made her decision. I'll stay, she said. Not because you're paying me. Not because I owe you. But because Lily deserves to grow up somewhere safe. Somewhere she can draw happy pictures instead of angry ones. Lorenzo nodded slowly. Then welcome home, Nina Castellano. He extended his hand formally, and she shook it. A partnership sealed, a family acknowledged, a life rebuilt from broken glass and fallen chandeliers. As the cafe filled with neighbors and laughter, as Sophia taught Lily to frost cookies, and Mrs. Chen told anyone who'd listen about our Nina, as Lorenzo sat in his booth watching over them all with quiet vigilance, Nina finally understood what she'd found. Not charity, not rescue. Just a chance to stand tall, to serve with dignity, and to prove that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who never stop standing, even when the world tries to knock them down. The crayon drawing watched over it all, a reminder that children see truths adults forget, that courage looks like a single mother holding a tray, that heroes don't always carry weapons, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to break. Outside, autumn leaves danced on the wind, and on Oak Street, in a corner cafe named for two daughters, a new story was just beginning. The end.